It's time for another low-budget binge. There's a wide variety in this week's grouping, a lot of strange and random stuff, and some of them are actually entertaining. Let's start binging. Welcome back to ML Miller Frights. I'm ML Miller. Before we begin, please do me a favor and punch that like button down below. Share this video with all of your social media addicted pals. Click subscribe to this channel and ring that bell for notifications. Low Budget Binge is where we venture down the path less traveled and look at low budget, no budget, and sometimes international films that never get that top billing you see with the usual Hollywood fare. I'll indicate in the review down below where you can find these films along with their trailers. Here we go. The Revenge of Robert, aka The Revenge of Robert the Doll, is available streaming on Tubi. It's directed and written by Andrew Jones. Picking up, eventually, more on that in a bit, where Robert and the Toymaker left off, with the Toymaker, played by Lee Bain, attempting to escape Germany on a train with Robert and his two doll companions in tow. The Revenge of Robert the Doll has the Toymaker and the dolls on that train with a Nazi assassin assigned to kill him and an Allied secret agent assigned to save him. Meanwhile, the Toymaker recollects his own sad origin to the ghost of the girl who gave him the Nazi spell book that gave Robert life. I say eventually because it's a good 40 minutes into The Revenge of Robert the Doll, a killer doll movie, until we get to the killer doll action. I find it perplexing that half the movie passes until we get to the part where the doll kills in the killer doll movie, especially when it's the fourth film of the series. I get it if they're working up to the doll moving and killing, but this film doesn't even do that. The first 40 minutes of The Revenge of Robert the Doll follows the plight of a young German housewife of a Nazi sympathizer who has procured the occult spell book that the Nazis were chasing in the Robert the Doll-less first 35 minutes of the last movie. The first portion really feels pointless as it goes further back in time to follow the book. But this isn't Robert the Book. This is Robert the Doll. Why not film how the doll was created? Instead, it's all about the book and how many hands it passed through before landing in the Toymakers. In the last review, I stated that it felt like Robert and the Toymaker felt like the first part of a movie with padding injected in so that the filmmaker Andrew Jones could stretch the story over two feature films. Now that I've seen The Revenge of Robert the Doll, I'm certain these two films were at one time one, or at least they were one script. There's a movie in itself if you add the first 35 minutes to the first 40 minutes where people sit around and pass the book back and forth to one another while stopping to add a lengthy Tarantinoian diatribe before each exchange. While the sidebars in Robert the Toymaker were entertaining because the actors were quite talented, in Revenge we get a less inspired speech about killing your first person, which is almost a word-for-word lift from Gandolfini's speech from True Romance. I found myself more intrigued at watching the clock in the first 40 minutes to see just when we would get to see the titular doll in full-on revenge action. The thing is, this is not a badly made film. It's capably acted, the scenes are compelling, and the actors do a decent job of telling the story. The problem is that the title states that this is a Robert the Doll movie, and it simply isn't. While the filler parts aren't painful to watch, it has very little to do with the main story of the Toymaker and his evil toys. So we're 4 films into the Robert the Doll films, and really, we know nothing about who Robert is, what makes him tick, or what motivates him. One would think that after 4 movies, there'd be a clue. Does Robert even have a soul? If so, where did it come from? Did the book actually make a soul for Robert, or pluck it from somewhere for it to inhabit the body of the doll? And that's the biggest frustration I have with this series. There's so many questions about the lead character. Sure, I may be looking too much into it, but with 4 movies dedicated to the little guy, one would think there would be some kind of depth put to the titular character. Instead, we get a lot of scenes of Nazi interrogation, some flashbacks, and a lot of book passing from one person to the next. Is it too much to expect to actually get to know Robert the Doll? By installment 1, there was a pretty strong indication of who Chucky was, and while she isn't animated or mobile, it's pretty clear what Annabelle is all about. Who knows how popular this series would have been had a skosh of personality been communicated in Robert the Doll and its sequels. There's only one film left in this series, Robert Reborn, and I'll be covering that one next time. A Town Full of Ghosts is new on-demand and digital download from No Sleep Films. It's directed and written by Isaac Rodriguez. Mark, played by Andrew C. Fisher, and his wife Jenna, played by Mandy Lee Rubio, have invested all of their money into refurbishing a ghost town called Blackwood Falls. What they don't know is that the expansive, abandoned town has a dark and violent history. Attempting to gain additional funds and advertising, Mark is streaming the entire experience on his YouTube channel, which captures Mark's growing obsession with the town and the escalating paranormal occurrences happening around him. Yes, this is a found footage film, and it's not a perfect film, but I will admit, despite its problems, A Town Full of Ghosts made me jump back in my seat more than once. This occurred mostly in the maze sequences. The town itself has a fence maze in one of its corners, and while the scares were predictable, I still couldn't avoid a foreboding feeling of creep as Mark turned blind corners leading into the darkest parts of the maze. Say what you will about the found footage genre, but I still fall for it as it places me just a bit closer into the action. Incorporating the maze is the most effective part of A Town Full of Ghosts, reminiscent of a haunted attraction maze where you have no idea what is lurking around the corner. These scenes are the scariest in the film. One of the cooler shots is from a drone which hovers above the maze, giving the viewer a look at it from above and seeing people wander around the maze below. It's this type of shot that I feel A Town Full of Ghosts should have had more of. That said, there's a ton of problems with A Town Full of Ghosts. It incorporates music and sound effects in moments that it couldn't feasibly be there. These are videos produced for Mark's YouTube page, but there's no mention of any additional editing being done. I've said it before, and I'll scream it again. If you feel the need to add in piano bangs, music bursts, and thunderous sound effects to your found footage film, then you obviously don't have any faith in the scares and the story. It's a surefire way of instantly shooing your viewer out of the edgy area filled with suspension of disbelief, a concept amplified by the choice of shooting in a found footage format. The more hands on the film that we are watching, the less legitimate it feels, which is a killer for found footage films. But the technical effects are the least of A Town Full of Ghosts' problems. The biggest is that the film is full of huge dramatic leaps. It seems the group has been in town for about 3 days. That doesn't give the story much time for a believable descent into madness, but they attempt to do it anyway. Characters begin to distrust Mark way too quickly, including his wife, who confesses that Mark isn't the person she fell in love with since entering the town, which was just a day or two ago. Another character professes that she is spooked out from being there, though we are never given a scene where she is actually spooked. Mark himself leaps from a somewhat sane and enthusiastic investor to full-blown Jack Torrance madman stalking his loved ones with an axe through the maze. These lost moments of transition are definitely lacking from the story and necessary for it to feel natural and believable. For the most part, A Town Full of Ghosts suffers the typical found footage symptoms. Not enough happens in the first half, leading to a mad dash of people panicking and running around, and all culminating with a burst of supernatural towards the end. There's a direct ripoff of Blair Witch Project at the end, and the whole thing seems to wrap up so quickly you wonder how you got there in the first place. There are attempts at jump scares throughout as the film flashes back and forward to the past and upcoming ghost attack scenes in snippets, but this again breaks the believability of the film we are seeing and making it feel less authentic. A Town Full of Ghosts is a little over an hour long, so much room could have been left to make the transitions in character more believable. As a result, it's hard to really get to know and like these characters, especially Mark, who ends up looking like a complete loser by the end of the film. Breaking some of the fundamental laws of making the footage feel authentically found is another mistake A Town Full of Ghosts makes. While I did jump a few times and the drone shots of the maze were effective, that's about all the positives I can muster for A Town Full of Ghosts. Abandon is new on-demand and digital download from Vertical Entertainment. It's directed by Spencer Squire and written by Erik Patterson and Jessica Scott. Sarah, played by Emma Roberts, and Alex, played by John Gallagher Jr., move into a home with their newborn child. Sarah is overwhelmed with postpartum depression, but hopes that decorating a new home will prove to be a new start for their family. Unfortunately, the house they live in has a dark past, and the ghosts of that past are restless. Being the first family to move in there since the last family was killed, Sarah and Alex aren't prepared for the horrors to come. Also, Michael Shannon plays Michael Shannon, playing a creepy neighbor who rarely knocks. While Emma Roberts is trying her best, it doesn't seem to be enough to save the toothless horrors that Abandoned provides. Sure, the film does a great job of setting up some scary scenes, but Sarah's reaction to these paranormal encounters, which include phantom children's laughter, visions of a burly man, footsteps in the night, a swarm of flies, and an especially grabby pair of hands under the bed, is as unbelievable as it comes. If anyone outside of this movie would have encountered a fraction of the strange phenomena that occurs in Abandoned, they'd be packing their bags. But because she seems to be too depressed and preoccupied with a baby who cries a lot, Sarah seems nonplussed by it all. There are numerous instances in Abandoned where something strange happens, Sarah screams, and then just grabs the baby and moves on to the next scene as if nothing has happened. It occurs over and over again, and makes no sense why Sarah isn't doing everything she can to get out of that house. John Gallagher Jr. is pretty strong in the few films I've seen him in. I liked 10 Cloverfield Lane, and loved Short Term 12. I even liked him in The Newsroom. But here he plays a cliched husband who promises to be there for his wife, but is always away due to work. In this case, he's a veterinarian preoccupied with a particularly bad stock of pigs at a neighbor's farm. It seems the plot wants to tie in these mysterious pig abnormalities with Sarah's problems at home, but the connection is weak at best. The only thing this does is conveniently remove Alex from the home so he doesn't experience the ghostly stuff, and gives him the unlikable and uncharacteristic scenes where he doubts the word of his own wife and acts like he's the one who is carrying all of the burden. It's an unintentionally negative role that is beyond the realm of cliché in these types of movies. The scenes of tension and suspense occasionally work. The culmination of ghost sounds and visions are creepy, but they never really amount to anything. The climax is lackluster and never achieves the level of scare that the build-up promises. The fact that really nothing has happened by the end of the film, and that it goes out on an almost too saccharinated note, left by hopes that this ghost movie would be something worthwhile, feel, well, abandoned. I just can't recommend this one, folks, despite the big-name cast. After Blue, Dirty Paradise, aka After Blue, Paradis Sale, is new in select theaters from Altered Innocence. It's directed and written by Bertrand Mandico. A young woman named Roxy, played by Paula Luna, ventures across the surface of a distant planet after the Earth was destroyed. The planet they found a home on can only support women, and all of the men have died off, having suffered from hair growing from inside of their bodies. While attempting not to succumb to mistakes that destroyed their homeworld, the women live a simple existence with no screens, technology, or chemistry, and live a primitive life on this strange new world. But when Roxy frees a witch named Kate Bush, played by Agatha Buzek, it threatens the peaceful balance the women have with the world around them. So Roxy and her hairdresser mother, Zora, played by Schindler's List's Alina Lowenschon, scour the bizarre wilderness to find Kate Bush and take her out with their rifle named Gucci. After Blue, Dirty Paradise is a wild one, to say the least. Director Bertrand Mandico has made a name for himself, delivering fantastical imagery layered with gay themes, most recently in his film The Wild Boys, which follows a group of rowdy boys, all of them played by female actors, pursued by captors attempting to tame them. I haven't seen that film, and it sounds interesting, especially if it's as vivid and alien as After Blue is. The story is truly weird. But to cut through the crap, it's just a story set where men no longer exist, and the women inseminate each other with what little sperm they have saved in order to keep reproducing. Mandico explains all of this in narration at the beginning, asking the viewer to open their mind and allow this fantasy to play out. In this culturally divided world, it's most likely this will be difficult for some, but if you try to look past the political hot buttons, Mandico has crafted quite the otherworldly experience in this sci-fi fantasy horror epic. The imagery alone should attract many to After Blue. It's glittery yet muddy. Everything is filmed through a psychedelic neon hue, but it's cast across a grimy-looking landscape. Seeing these women drudge through the landscape reminded me of scooping my spoon through melted Neapolitan ice cream or Fruit Loops that have been soaking in milk for too long. Mandico has gone out of his way to make this landscape different than anything that exists in our world, with reflective spots on trees, strange land masses, and multicolored skylines. In many ways, it feels a lot like the foggy lens work used in Ridley Scott's Legend, where fantastical creatures are lit with a grimy tint and captured through a smeared lens. The story is strange as well. While they don't want to use the tech that destroyed the world before, the women seem to have no problem brandishing guns, which Mandico labels with designer names like Gucci, and Chanel. While this is a basic quest movie, many distractions occur along the way as Roxy and her mom run into an artist named Sternberg, played by Vimala Pons, and her blind male android partner. Sternberg has all kinds of distractions for our wandering pair as she leads a life of decadence on the fringe of an established society, shunning most of their rules, getting drunk, and of course doing some lesbianing. After Blue is, shall we say, a very French film, which means it's got a hell of a lot of nudity. At any given moment, any of the cast might strip down and start frolicking for any old reason. Everyone seems to be overwhelmingly horny in After Blue. Almost any time Roxy and her mom stop walking and are alone, they end up masturbating, and sex seems to be the first and foremost thing on both of their minds as they kiss and screw anything they run into. I don't know what Mandico is trying to say with this expansive fable. He truly is a visionary director in terms of the lengths he goes to create a tactile alien world with very few CG effects. All of the strangeness seems to be quite practical, as they seem to be getting down and dirty with these often nude beauties. The expansive sets are intricately detailed, quite impressive on what looks to be a limited budget. The filmmaker seems to have created quite an amazing feast for the eyes. Food for the brain? Not so sure about that. If this is some kind of gender study or feminist message like Mandico's previous films, I don't know if After Blue is communicating that very well. I doubt this is what Mandico is trying to say, but it seems the women in After Blue certainly aren't thriving in a world without men. They're dirty, lonely, poor, and horny as hell. There seems to be a problem with hair growth with these women that requires constant lasering. They smoke worms like blunts. Hell, I have no idea why the bad guy in this movie is named after singer-songwriter Kate Bush. It's all beyond me, and I'm okay with that. Maybe the thematic heft went over my head, or maybe Mandico is simply trying to tell a vivid fantasy that would fit nicely into any issue of Heavy Metal magazine. If you don't mind the often meandering and strange plot, there sure is an awful lot of beautiful and surreal dream and nightmare imagery and atmosphere to soak in from After Blue. Finally, get ready for Ninja Badass. It's new on Blu-ray, digital download, and on demand from Bayview Entertainment. It's directed and written by Ryan Harrison. Rex, played by writer-director Ryan Harrison, is an aimless loser who lives on his mother's couch and hangs with his best buddy Kano, played by Mitch Schlegel. After he meets the girl of his dreams, played by Alicia Schnellbacher, at the pet store, Rex is incapacitated when a group of ninjas loot the store of its puppies and kidnap the pet store girl. Vowing revenge, Rex must learn the ways of the ninja from an egg roll-eating master named Haskett, played by Stephen C. Rose, and a gun-happy gal named Jojo, played by Tatiana Ortiz, in order to rescue the pet store girl, saving the puppies, and fulfill his destiny. But Master Ninja Big Twitty, played by Daryl Francis, is bent on stopping him, no matter how many puppies he has to eat. Ninja Badass is a ridiculous and inappropriate lo-fi action movie spoof reminiscent of Kung Fury, The Toxic Avenger, The Taint, and Kung Pao Enter the Fist. It doesn't care if it offends, and probably would be giddy if it did. In this sensitive day and age we live in, it's awesome to see such an uncouth and ill-mannered comedy being made. It tells its own unique story while paying homage and making fun of the very genre it was birthed from. The humor is definitely lowbrow, and one might have to be in the right mood to endure it, but this movie hit me at the perfect time, and I found myself chuckling nonstop from start to finish. Fans of Tim and Erik's awesome show Great Job is the target audience. Ninja Badass is filled with rudimentary animations, cheesy explosions, and bizarre characters doing oddball things. In the midway point of the film, the bad guy, Big Twitty, rips Rex's heart out and replaces it with a puppy. Why? No clue. But it's weird and funny as hell. Why am I reviewing Ninja Badass if I cover horror? Well, the carnage in Ninja Badass is legendary. Heads explode, chests burst open, puppies are eaten, arms are ripped from their sockets. It's a battle royale filled with the gnarliest of amateur fight scenes. Not one martial art is represented properly in Ninja Badass, but it's all part of the fun. Don't expect to learn any new ninja moves from this film. Do expect to laugh a lot. Simply the way Rex screams, "Ninja!" every time he leaps into danger worked on me every time. Ninja Badass is a bit long. It runs about an hour and 45 minutes, and I think that's too long for this type of film. Comedy like this should be in and out like a bandit, and while I can't think of any specific scenes that would have been fit to cut, a leaner, meaner edit might make the whole thing more digestible for most. Still, those looking for a new idiot protagonist to root for look no further than writer, director, star Ryan Henderson. He's a complete moron, and I couldn't help but root for his moronic plan to come to pass. Ninja Badass has rapid-fire comic timing, inundating the viewer with one ludicrous image after another. If you take things too seriously, Ninja Badass is the remedy. It's bloody, violent, and all sorts of wrong. It's highly recommended for lovers of goofy and gory cinema.
You're doomed to live the life you're meant to be, stuck inside your reality. You're